Hello, friends. In the brand new episode of Crit Talks with Dr. Anand Kulkarni, today's our topic for deliberation is a very, very complex, rather controversial, and often misunderstood uh, idea of post structuralism. In the last episode, we tried to understand structuralism and its impact on different disciplines, including, of course, literature. In today's session, we will try to explore this complex issue, of course, with the guidance of or under the guidance of Dr. Anand Kulkarni. I welcome you, sir, on the show. To begin with, let us again begin or start our discussion from the point of terms. These two terms, postmodernism and post-structuralism, these are often, in a way, of course, they are overlapping, but often they are misunderstood. So whether post-structuralism comes under postmodernism or whether postmodernism is a part of post-structuralism or what exactly all these two things are. So I think if you start with these two terms, I think it will be a very good platform to open this discussion.
Thanks, Dr. Pranav Ratnaparkhi and Professor Ganeshram Borade. Also, good morning to all viewers. You rightly pointed out in your introduction that post-structuralism is relatively a very difficult area to deal with, and there are more problems and less solutions. But any discussion of post-structuralism should begin with the understanding of the term itself. And I should confess at the very beginning that there are no clear-cut definitions of post-structuralism, and there is no easy way to know it. However, it doesn't mean that it deters us from knowing in simple ways possible. To begin with, is post-structuralism postmodernism, or what is the relation between post-structuralism and postmodernism? Postmodernism, like modernism, is a movement which has wide application. Post-structuralism is relatively a narrow term. Postmodernism consists of post-structuralism and not the other way around. So there are so many other movements which have been carried out in the name of postmodernism, and post-structuralism can be viewed as one of the movements that comes under postmodernism. As modernism has been a movement carrying forward the Enlightenment issues, postmodernism is also a movement that carries forward some of the notions of and critiques some of the notions of modernism. So postmodernism may be viewed as a continuation of modernism in one sense and a rejection of modernism in the other sense. And post-structuralism can also be understood as an offshoot of, a ramification of, a branching out of post-structuralism. Because post-structuralist theorists have been postmodernist, but postmodernist theorists have not been necessarily post-structuralists. So that we have to understand. In other words, and in a very short way, we can say that postmodernism covers post-structuralism and not the other way around. So that is it. Now we shall move on to the next point of post-structuralism, because this prefix is always very problematic. Or should I use a term that Foucault used in his analysis, and it is that the prefix post problematizes structuralism. So post can be understood as a questioning. Post can be understood as a challenge. It can be understood as a reassessment, a reworking, a redefinition of structuralism. Now, what post has to do with this post-structuralism, or what post-structuralism means? Then we can turn towards the idea of structuralism or the ideas of structuralism. In earlier episode, I think we had touched upon some of the basics of structuralism, so I need not repeat them over here. I would just say, and it is enough, that post-structuralism is actually a critique of, a criticism of, a challenge posed to structuralist ideas on one hand, and it is also a continuation of some of the basic notions of structuralism. So we can understand post in both ways. Post as a challenge posed, question asked, and at the same time post as a continuation of some of the ideas of structuralism. So I think it is sensible to consider post-structuralism in both ways, and it depends upon you as a reader or a researcher or a student of criticism and theory as to what approach you would like to prefer or what is your perspective. In other words, whether you would like to see post-structuralism as a continuation of, as an extension of structuralism, or you look at it as a rejection of structuralism. And post-structuralist ideas all depend on these kinds of reassessments, these kinds of reworkings. Either way it is possible. So you can reject structuralist ideas and can claim, and you have a host of theorists and critics standing by your side and guiding you as to how structuralist ideas should be rejected and what are the grounds on which they should be rejected. And on the other hand, there are other critics as well and theorists who would like to see that post-structuralism is nothing else but its extension. So we have to understand it this way, I think, to begin with.
Right. So, sir, who are the critics whom with we should start, and what are the main propositions of post-structuralism?
Yes, post-structuralism is basically language-oriented theory or a group of theories. It is a basket that contains too many theories. For example, Jacques Lacan's psychoanalysis, Roland Barthes' semiology, Foucault's archaeology and genealogy, and of course Derrida's deconstruction, to name a few. There are other as well.
Yeah.
But then these are the prominent, we can say. And all these are the theories which are primarily concerned about language. Now, there has always been an issue, and perhaps a very problematic issue with the students of literature and language, that why these theorists have turned towards language and so exclusively towards language. I think your earlier question about the difference between postmodernism and post-structuralism can be negotiated over here as well. Postmodernist critics and theorists are less concerned with language. Post-structuralist theorists are more concerned with language.
Right.
For example, you have Lyotard, who doesn't bother about language. But you have Derrida, contemporary to him, who bothers more about language.
Yeah.
And many of them. Even Michel Foucault, who is not decidedly a language philosopher by any orientation. He is basically a historian, but still he is bothered about the working of language. Same is the case with Lacan, who is in fact a psychoanalyst, but is bothered about language. And many of them are bothered about language. Many Marxists, neo-Marxists, post-Marxists,
even feminists, I think.
Even feminists. They are also bothered about the use of language, the working of language.
Sir, exactly why they are immediately such kind of so many of doubts and so many of in a way concerns about this system of language, which was so in a way blindly followed by the people, or there was a great kind of faith that language communicates. So what exactly went this change? Why this change happened immediately?
There are reasons for that. There are some historical and cultural reasons. For a detailed discussion, perhaps we shall go to it some other time, but I shall make a passing reference to that because you have raised a valid question. It's a very important question. Why philosophers have For example, Derrida is basically a philosopher. His orientation is in philosophy. Barthes, to an extent, can be claimed to be a proper literary critic. But I am doubtful about the rest of the post-structuralist theorists to be the proper literary critics,
Right.
including Foucault and others as well, because they have their trainings in different disciplines. Still, they are bothered about language. The reason is this, that there was, in the very beginning of 20th century, there was a turn towards language. This was a linguistic turn, and it was ushered in by a very famous but equally very difficult philosopher like Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein, for the first time, turned the entire focus away from philosophy towards the consideration of language. And the reason, of course, was that they were bothered about what kind of relation is there between language and reality. So they found that that language had something very problematic or something very inexpressible, indefinable in itself, which either hides reality or overexpresses it. That is why they changed the focus, or took the focus away from, philosophers took the focus away from their pursuit of knowledge towards their study of language. And then they found that medium is also very problematic, and the study of language would help them understand the philosophical or knowledge-based questions in a relatively varied and diverse ways. So that is, I think, the concern why they turn towards. And then, there are others. For example, even Bertrand Russell was bothered about language. Many of them, a mathematician originally by training and a great philosopher as well. And then you come down and you shall see that many of them were bothered about language. The reason, as I said, was that they considered language as a medium to be an important issue. And if they negotiate with language or try to study language, they would be in a position to better understand issues related to knowledge. That is that.
So, sir, can we say that because they had or they have essential doubts or basic doubts about language, and because of that, even other systems came into some kind of problems? So, like culture, for example, or history, for example, because the moment you understand language as a means of communication or expression of something, if your medium is a problematic thing, then the thing which you are referring to, that automatically becomes problematic. So is that the essence of post-structuralism?
We would
not
say
essence, but is that the summary of that post-structuralism?
Yeah, we can say it to be like that. But then, as you said, it is a kind of problem that they came across, or a set of problems, and they found that studying language would perhaps help them understand the concerns that philosophy has towards knowledge in a much better way. Or in simple words, we can say that study of language would throw some light on issues related to knowledge. That is what we can say about that. Although this is a very reductive way of knowing it. But I think at the level at which we are trying to understand these things, this is good. Teachers and students who will watch us or try to know these things would perhaps get the things better if we keep this kind of simplistic interpretation of these things.
Okay. So sir, now what is this bearing of this entire argument on the study of literature, basically, because we are thinking it from that point of view?
Yeah. I shall complete the next part of your question that you asked earlier about language. That these theorists are bothered about language probably because they are more bothered about the relation between language and reality. Especially the post-structuralists are more bothered about that. We would not refer to Julia Kristeva. Some other time we perhaps will take up the issue with Julia Kristeva's propositions about language.
Right.
So because that is one of the important dealings from the feminist point of view. But you shall see, these are all bothered about language, perhaps because, as earlier we pointed out, knowledge issues are there. But at the same time, there is one more issue, and the issue of communication perhaps you raised that point.
Yeah.
Whether language communicates, is language communicative? In fact, it started with Albert Camus, who raised doubts about, in his compositions, he raised doubt about, though he was not a theorist in the established sense of the term. But then the way he wrote, you will understand immediately that he was minimizing the informational level of language. That is, he was keeping it down and showing to us the bare limits of language, or how language can be used in its extreme form. So that, I think, is what the writers have done. Now these theorists turn towards making a serious inquiry into the nature of language. And then they found that language, the real issue is with language and not with the reality that language expresses. This is why they are more bothered about. And then the communication models, of course, do not work for them because language is not that transparent. It is not that clear. It is not that expressive that it has been believed to be. So the opaqueness of language, the difficulty of language, the complexities inherent in language, perhaps, were some of the things which engrossed theorists, and then they started discussing, analyzing language from that point of view.
Sir, can we say that they used language as a base and then they build their superstructures on language as a base?
This metaphor perhaps will not work with post-structuralists.
Okay.
This is a Marxist metaphor and will not precisely work, but you can use other metaphor as well. For example, there is a certain set of principles based on you can say like that. But then, this is all very slippery. Arguing they have proposed theories. For example, Foucault squarely denied, openly rejected any kind of tagging, He did not want to be called a genealogist, an archaeologist, a theorist, a historian, anything of that. Same is the case with Derrida, with Lacan as well. Most of them refrained from any use of any title, because they believed that they were not proposing any theory as such. So we have to understand that the reason why post-structuralism has been so much problematic is this, that we are not in a position to hang on to any set of ideas. What happens is, you and I and all of us, we have been trained and conditioned in such a way that unless we have certain things presented before us, or unless we are able to grip on certain fixed things, we cannot understand. Our understanding goes through certainty and fixity.
Right. Labels, basically.
Yeah, labels. Unless they are there, we are not in a position to do that. Right. So, but then what perhaps you raised can be a very valid question from the conventional point of view, from the traditional point of view. Now, these have turned out to be the theories, though the theorists did not consider what they were proposing were theories. But today we take them to be a group of theories. They are critics, basically. By this I mean CRITIQUES and not CRITICS. These are critiques, or what you call criticisms. To use the plural of that. That is that. Even theories would perhaps bring us into all kinds of problems. This slipperiness is something which makes theories difficult. But I think because they are so fluctuating and so they are so opaque in nature, they are so challenging and so interesting as well. I am sorry, Ghanshyam, I did not address your question directly because I could not, perhaps.
No, that was just about. So I thought.
Sir, coming back to that notion of its impact on literature.
Post-structuralism is, as I said, is basically a group of theories about language, and its nature is disruptive. These are the two things that we have to understand. Post-structural theories are language oriented and they are disruptive in nature. They pose questions, they ask questions, they challenge, they are radical. Now, what is this radicalization? If we understand this, we will understand what is their bearing on literature. They radicalize or they challenge our common sense thinking. What we take to be true, they challenge. The given ideas are challenged. For example, language is communicative, is something which is given to us, and we believe in it. For example, literary works are communicative, they are message oriented, and they have some meaning. For example, you and I read poetry or novel because we want to know its meaning. So if we turn towards a poem or a novel, we turn towards them to understand their meanings. So our concern is basically to understand the meaning of a poem, the meaning of a novel or a play as common readers. So this is a common sense way of looking at literature. But then what post-structural theory helps us to know is that this is not possible because literary works are not full of meanings. They don't have any message to deliver to the readers, and that they are not as simple as we take them to be. So this spirit of inquisitiveness, this spirit of questioning the given, is something which post-structural theories give to us. So if you ask me what is the influence of impact of these theories on literature, it is this, that they help us to know that the author is not the source of meaning. Author is also not the creator. The writer is not the creator. The writer is not the source of meaning. We should not learn the biography of a writer if we want to understand the literary work, that the literary work is not full of meanings, and that there are no reading between the lines that we have to bother about. And all these things are there because the nature of language inherently is so complex. Language is so difficult. It is not that simple. It is not communicative. It is not informative. So these are some of the things that, some of the ideas that post-structural theory has given to us as readers of literature. So our approach towards literature has radically changed, drastically changed, because we have started questioning the role of author, started questioning the role of author in determining the meaning. Also that a literary work has a particular set of meaning to offer to the readers. And also that the text contains everything in the sense in which we have tried to understand, though post-structural theories claim so. But then this spirit of questioning is something I think the post-structural theories have given to the students of literature, and it has left a great impact on the study of literature as well. That we have to understand. So meaning is not possible because meaning is not determinable. A single meaning is not determinable. We can't do that. That is another thing that it has given to us, that we should not be happy with what is given to us because that is not enough. Also that language is not communicative and that language is not that way reliable. What a writer writes or what a text proposes is not always very reliable. It says something and it means something. That is
So
what
that
we
sir,
have to
entire
understand.
issue of authenticity is questionable.
Of course, very true. The
Authenticity
authenticity
of
of language
writers,
is,
even of the
yes,
text.
authenticity of writer, the text, the language, the medium that we use, everything. And you know, there have been claims, traditionally speaking, about literature, about literary works, like literature is universal, like literature is objective, like literature is applicable to all people in the world, that literature is eternal and permanent, and that literature has a particular message to deliver to the readers. All these notions have been seriously challenged.
Okay.
And that literature as a discipline with its own autonomy and status also has been challenged. Now, a literary work is not limited to literariness just. you know, there have been so many other disciplines, so many other ideas from other disciplines that have made inroads into the understanding of literature.
Literature. Correct.
For example, how do I understand a play by any modern writers as a reader? You know, I have a set of theories, and these theories may be coming from feminism or psychoanalysis or Marxism or deconstruction or any other theory for that matter, new historicism also. And our approach as readers towards the play or a novel changes and radically changes. These are the things, perhaps I think, these are the bearings on literary studies of post-structural ideas. And
Right.
this is lamentable. This is lamentable also because there has been a loud cry on the sides of the critics and theorists coming from humanism that criticism and theory have been unfortunately working over and heavily working over the basic ideas of literature, that they have encroached upon literature, that critics have nothing to do with literary works. That is fine. But then, as I earlier pointed out, you know, there have been certain texts which you cannot understand. I'm doubtful how many common readers can very well understand Seamus Heaney's poems, a very recent poet, you know. And even Tom Stoppard also, his plays which have been increasingly moving away from absurdity, recent plays, and you will see that Stoppard has stopped dealing with, negotiating with absurdity and has turned towards so many other things. You can take a very simple example of Satish Hadekar in Marathi, for example. How can you understand Satish Hadekar? How can you understand Mahesh Alkunchar? How can you understand Vijay Tendulkar without knowing the Marxist and socialistic issues? I am doubtful about that. So any experimentative literature and 20th century literature and 21st century literature has been increasingly and progressively very experimental. And that is where I think the role of theory is very vital. It is very important because it works as signpost for us as readers. It helps us to understand. Unless you are properly trained into or at least introduced to the basics of experimentation in literature, it is difficult for you to understand.
Right.
So theories may probably confuse you, but I think it is better to get confused than become ignorant.
So it's a necessary
I'm sorry,
evil, sir.
yeah, it's a necessary evil, and we have to deal with that.
Yeah.
That is it.
Sir, actually, we wanted to touch upon Derrida, but I hope that the time is running out of our hand. So we can plan
No,
a different
I
session.
think, the discussion of post-structuralism will take sessions together, you know, one after the other, because it is such a vast area and very difficult also. And many of us, students and teachers and even researchers are not aware of some of the basics of post-structuralism. We can say that there are more confusions than clarities. So it will take a series of sessions one after the other to understand them. And knowing Derrida is, of course, another matter of series. So I think it is better if we take another session on exclusively on Derrida.
Very good. Yes.
That would perhaps
Sure.
help
Right.
all of us to know.
Absolutely. So we can have a different session.
Yeah.
Right, sir. Yes, Shyam, you have something to say.
Okay. With this, what I understood or what I came up with was text proposes and a post-structural critique disposes, right? So that sort of
very true.
confusion is there. However, with this complex theory that we have here, how does one approach this kind of theory in order to understand it? Right? Because there are more confusions than clarity. So if we have to understand post-structural ideas, how do we approach them in order to understand them or know them at least?
Yeah. Thanks, Ghanshyam, for raising this question. I would start with somewhat different idea, and then we shall turn to the question. This will take not more than 2 minutes. Okay. This is true, but then you shall see post-structural theories are more bothered about text. That point perhaps missed out of our discussion. that post-structural theories are the theories into textualities. The issue of textuality has been raised by many theorists. That is, they deal more with texts. Fine. To use a cliche, we should say that text has turned out to be a site of inquiry. I'm sorry, this is a cliche statement, but that is there. That precisely expresses the point that I want to raise. Secondly, yes, it is true. Post-structural theories dispose of, but you shall see that disposal has been started by Friedrich Nietzsche. So you cannot entirely credit post-structural theorists for having disposed of theory, disposed of common sense understandings. The credit goes to Mr. Nietzsche, followed by Martin Heidegger also, and then we come down to Derrida, where there have been disposals of the things that have been accepted. Fine, and they have been the questioners to the systems, to God, to the metaphysical presence, and all those things. Probably we shall discuss these things when we shall discuss Derrida. I shall come to your question then. Okay, what kind of approach we shall maintain towards as researchers? Your question was about researchers, no?
Researchers.
Yeah, researchers and students,
Even
and teachers.
teachers, sir, for that matter.
Even teachers for that matter.
So how should we approach theory? That is what I think you asked.
Yes.
I think we should approach theory in a very simple way. We should start with a very simple understanding that understanding is not possible. Though this is difficult to do, if you are ready to unlearn what you have learned, I think it becomes the first step towards knowing post-structural theories. If you and I and teachers and students decide that we shall stop thinking in a traditional way and we shall start thinking in an anti-traditional way. Now, how can we do this? By raising questions. Should I give you an example? That will perhaps help us.
Yes.
You take any poem for that matter. A poem by this famous Indian poet,
Ezekiel.
Scorpion. Nissim
Ezekiel.
Ezekiel's poems, the Scorpion.
Night of the Scorpion.
Night of the Scorpion. Now, how do you understand it? You as a common reader, I as a common reader, in a very different way. I understand that the poem is about Scorpion, it is about night, it is about evil, it is about poison, it is about ignorance, and all that set of ideas that is there, But you shall see that there are certain things that we can question to the poem or question to the text. For example, you can bring in the idea of Indianness in the poem. We shall ask whether this poem is addressing actually to the Indian idea of culture, Indian idea of society. So you can interpret this poem from the Marxist point of view. You can interpret this poem from the political point of view. You can raise questions about the very art of poetry. For example, the poem is more narrative. As long as the last two lines do not come, the poem turns out to be very narrative. It narrates an incident, isn't it? And it questions so many things about the Indian society, about the superstition in India. Now you can raise a question whether this is really true, or this is there which has been metaphorically presented. This is just one way of questioning the poem. I am not questioning the very survival of the poem. I am trying to give some bits of ways how we can understand the poem, approach the poem. Now, if you understand the poem in these different ways, perhaps the poem would reveal so many different things. That is what I think. You can take so many other examples with so many other poems, for example, and you will understand that. Say, for example, an introduction by Kamala Das.
Kamala Das, yeah.
Now, that is about the use of language. And you shall see that it is patently, decidedly a very political poem. And it talks about the freedom that is given to the poet to choose her medium of expression. And there can be no doubt about that. But then if you are living in a country like India, which is multilingual, you shall see this proposition that you will write into a medium that you choose would perhaps turn out to be very argumentative. A woman speaking and a woman speaking in a medium that she had chosen to speak. So not only this is an expression of an artist or a poet. This is an expression of a woman as well. That a woman would like to express, and that she has not been allowed, unfortunately, to express in a patriarchal society, would perhaps give us a different interpretation of the poem. This, I think, how we should turn towards poems, towards novels, towards plays, and then we would be in a position to. So, my advice to readers, teachers, and students of post-structural theories would be this: that you please develop the idea develop the skill of raising questions, start questioning, try to bring different ideas, different notions, which probably the text would not allow you to do that, because text in a conventional sense will not lend to these kinds of inquiries, but then you have to bring them into the text. You call it to be an infiltration into the text or an inquiry into the text, to use a sophisticated term, but then it is there, and then the text will open it up to you, and the text will give you perhaps what the text would not have given to you in the conventional study of the text. So the spirit of resistance, the spirit of questioning, the spirit to think differently and adopting uncommon sense would be the first step towards do that. Secondly, you should be aware of some of the terms and vocabularies, the terminology that has been specifically used in theories, unless you are, say, for example, if you want to apply a Marxist theory, you should be familiar with some of the Marxist notions, Marxist ideas, the terminology that has been used. So some training into that, some familiarity with the terms would perhaps help you to ease the inquiry. I will not say it will completely put into a comfortable position, but it will certainly reduce, it will minimize the level of complexity and will help you understand the things better. But my own experience, dear Pranav and Ghanesham, is this, and to readers as well, watchers as well, viewers as well, is this: that if you start dealing with post-structural theories courageously, in some way, with maintaining some sort of boldness, these theories are so interesting and in a way so rewarding that they will help you understand everything in a very different light, in a very different perspective.
Right.
So it's always very beneficial to deal with them, not because they are problematic or difficult, but because they are rewarding.
Right.
It's very positive towards approach towards theoretical approaches,
Right.
Fine. I think this addresses to at least some part of your question. It is difficult because we do not have a set of principles, set of ideas that we can put forth a ready-made set of ideas, and we can say and we can prescribe, well, these are the things, you follow them and then it becomes comfortable to you. Because they are interdisciplinary, theories are interdisciplinary in nature. There is a word called Bahushrut in Marathi. That is what you call Antarshakhiya. I am sorry, I am using these words because these are important for viewers to understand. Unless you are multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and unless you are in a position to understand them correctly, and you are multidimensional, it is difficult for you. If you are a student of literature, you should not remain a student of literature forever. You should also be a student of other disciplines which surround literature. If that happens, then it becomes very easy for you and very interesting also.
Right. Correct.
That is it, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So friends, I think, of course, after today's deliberation, probably some kind of negativity about post-structuralism or about some kind of confusion is somehow decreased, or we are now will be in a better position to approach these theories, not as something a burden or a headache or a very a kind of propositions that keep us or make us scratch our head altogether, but more, as sir has said, it is laborious, of course, but very engaging. So I think from this point of view, if we approach post-structuralism and the theories inside it, subsets of those theories, probably that would be a wonderful kind of achievement for us as a student, as a teacher, and of course as a researcher. We wanted to touch upon Derrida, but as sir suggested, we have a different session for that. And in the next session, we'll deal with Derrida. So I urge all the readers to keep watching, keep endorsing us. Thank you, sir, so much for your presentation today. It was wonderful experience to listen to you. It has been always, and I think we are moving towards a tamasoma jyotirgamaya. So the tama that is there, the darkness that is spread throughout the path of literary theory and criticism is now we are moving slowly towards out of the tunnel of that. So we are moving towards a some sort of jyoti maybe to begin with, which later on can be a dazzling sun. So thank you, sir, for
Yes.
enlightening our path in this direction.
Yes.
I thank Sham for participating in the discussion meaningfully, and we keep coming back to you with some new episodes and with some new points and topics. Thank you so much for your patient listening. Thank you.